This is Inside Boxing Daily with Jeremiah Preisser. Of course, you all know me by now, so, introductions are probably not necessary at this point. But as usual, I want to thank all of you guys who listen in every single day. I really, really appreciate it. And again, I would like some more feedback on the show, just to get some of you guys chatting. See if I'm doing something wrong, see if I can do something, a bit righter than I already am. Either way. Anyways, I'm really going to be freestyling it tonight. Not a whole lot of news going on right now. And it really I'm not really good at this kind of stuff, to be honest with you. I like talking about the news, but a lot of it feels like gossip. And I'm not the gossiping type. It's like, it's just when things aren't going on, you get these camps, and people are even more fractured than they used to be. So you got these, Wilder camps and Joshua camps and Fury camps, and it's just a lot of speculation at the moment, and who's ducking who, and I don't know. I can't get on the train with all this fanboyism. You know what I mean? It's like, stop putting guys on pedestals. Don't deify these guys. They're just men, right? They're not God amongst us. Zeus wasn't sleeping with any of their mothers, and they're cutting the heads off Medusa. Medusa or something. Come on, it's just not that serious. And anyways, funny enough, a lot of these guys jump ship when things start going bad. Anyways, once they see a hole in the hole, it's not long before they give up the water buckets and just, get on that life raft and head away. But, I want to start off with something that I thought was pretty easy to pick. First off, just about nobody's talking about it, but Aegis Kavaliauskas, a guy that I know pretty well. He's been on the show before. I wrote a letter of recommendation for his immigration into the U.S., and I was actually, quite happy that he asked me to do so. So I appreciate that. And he's just a good dude. Interesting fellow, nice. But yeah, he's fighting the new, quote unquote, the new Ray Robinson. And, Ray Robinson, I think, poses some sort of threat in this fight. He's not, he lacks firepower. He's nothing like, the original Ray Robinson, but he's got good size. He's lanky, he's crafty, he's got some experience, he's got an interesting backstory. So he's a guy that I like as well, so, just given his size, I think this is, a pretty good fight for Kavaliauskas right now. And then eventually Kavaliauskas, it's going to happen. He's eventually going to get Terrence Crawford, because Bob Arum really doesn't have anybody in his promotional banner who's really on that level right now. He used to have Jesse Vargas. Vargas is no longer with him. Kavaliauskas is really the only, maybe I'm wrong here. No, I don't think I am. But yeah, Kavaliauskas is really about the only top 10-ish kind of guy under his promotional banner. So it's inevitable that he's going to get Terrence Crawford. And yeah, I don't even pay attention to the Alphabet Trinket organization rankings, but you can bet your ass that Kavaliauskas is very close to Terrence Crawford. All Bob, come on, we all know that Bob Arum and the WBO are butt buddies, and all it takes is a snap of the fingers, and the WBO place him number one, label him mandatory, and then fans will eat that crap up and act like it's got to happen. But I like Kavaliauskas. He's a nice dude. He's come a long way. He's developed good boxing. He's always had good boxing skills. But, I've seen that he's trying to stay on his jab a bit more. He looked really sharp in his last outing against a bona fide puncher, a guy that a lot of people thought had a serious chance in that one. And when I, authored my piece, the top 10 biggest punchers in the welterweight division, Kavaliauskas and his opponent were both on there. And so, it was an interesting fight, but Kavaliauskas ended up making pretty short work of it, did a real good job. And again, he's he's had some on and off performances, but mostly on. And he's a damn good puncher. He's sharp. He's got good amateur background experience. And eventually the time will come, and we'll just have to deal with that. Sorry about that. I also noticed that Lou DiBella wanted to bring, how do you say his first name here? I know I'm probably going to mess that up. But Kerman Lejarraga. I hope that's right. If not, go ahead, correct me on Twitter. Make fun of how I just said it there. Sorry. But now, Lou DiBella is trying to bring him stateside, and I actually think that's a good idea. The Spaniard is a bona fide puncher. I'm believing more and more, especially after watching Errol Spence. I put Errol Spence number 1 on that top 10 list that I made. And of course, a lot of this is conjecture, and it's hard to read in. I did get some feedback, and they were like, "Oh, well, Keith Thurman's not that big of a puncher. He doesn't deserve to be that high of a place." But to me, it's just there's little to differentiate these guys. None of these guys are one-punch knockout artists, but I think, I'm starting to believe that the closest thing to it is the Spaniard. He's raw, his technique is not that tight, but the power is thudding. That's certainly one thing that he's got naturally, something that, it wasn't bred into him. He didn't come from this, Soviet school of fighting. He's just heavy-handed, and he gets guys out of there. And I like the way he fights. He's aggressive. He goes and gets it. He doesn't look like somebody who's going to be able to hang with the best guys out there, but, he can provide some interesting fights, especially if you pair him correctly. So I'm looking forward to that, and I hope, the sooner the better. But again, it's just a product of matchmaking at that point. But again, good fighter. I like the guy. He's just exciting. He's a guy that brings it. And punchers are a lot of us are fond of guys like that. So what did I see here? I saw that Hurd said that he had enough at 154. To keep his interest down there for a while. And I think a lot of us have asked these questions, but how the hell does Jarrett Hurd make 154? Now, I don't know. Maybe it could be genetics. I don't know. It could be that he's abusing diuretics. That very well could be it too. Steroids, one or the other. Again, I don't want to get accusatory. But, I don't know. You just ask questions when a guy is that big. Jesus, I saw him standing next to Kelly Pavlik. What was it, 3 months ago or something? And he looks almost as big as Pavlik, who is talking about coming back as a cruiserweight. And I know post-retirement, Kelly Pavlik had been lifting weights. So he got, he never really got ripped or anything, but he got bulkier. So yeah, Hurd looked, just about the same size as the guy. So I don't know how he's doing it, but hell, if he can keep doing it, it's probably best that he does. I talked about it on the last show. If you can make the weight comfortably, without any health scares, do it. Because you're maximizing your advantages there. And Hurd at 154 is just a physical monster. The dude is just. He's just too big and too strong for anybody, in my opinion. Once he beat Lara, I was convinced that he is going to be the number one guy at 154. And I was even more convinced after watching Charlo lose to Tony Harrison. I think like most people, I thought Charlo, won that fight, but it doesn't matter. To me, and we do have to remember that Tony Harrison was outboxing Hurd too. Harrison is a skilled guy. In fact, I'm trying to think of who did the best against Harrison. Come to think about it, was it Willie Nelson maybe? Nelson was a tall, lanky guy, and I haven't seen that fight in a while, and I don't even know what's happened to Willie Nelson since, but I remember Willie Nelson, because he was so tall, it gave Harrison some trouble. But yeah, we got to remember that Harrison was outboxing Hurd before he got stopped. So again, that would be an interesting fight, with Charlo and Hurd, and I really hope that happens. I mean, the rematch with Harrison is going to happen. I don't have much problem going on record with saying that I think Charlo beats him. What I think is even clearer. Harrison is a damn good fighter, and he's got a good jab, and everybody's recognized that he's been a skilled guy, but he just hasn't, a lot of times his mettle has not been there for him, and he's had to check out. But I just think Charlo beats him, and I think then you get Hurd versus Charlo. That's a clear number one and number two, and then you get a new lineage. So the winner of that fight would be the champion of the world, and that's what most of these guys should shoot for, and it seems like they both want it. So let's get on with it. Sorry about the coughing too. I think my children might have given me a slight cold, but I'm drinking a bunch of orange juice, hoping I can weather this shit real quick. But I did want to go over. I did want to go over for the on this day, and I honestly think because there's just been boxing history is so rich, it's just so deep, and I like following the old guys, and I do my best to follow the new guys too. But of course, with anybody, there's a gap in knowledge. I mean, we're talking about a sport that's well over 100 years, and we're talking about the modern sports. I mean, obviously, gloved boxing is over 100 years old, but it's just such a deep sport. But I'm gonna go with something real modern tonight, and I'm gonna go with Sergey Kovalev versus Cedric Agnew. Sorry. And that was one of those fights that Kovalev was coming up. He was established, but he wasn't well known to American fight fans. And that fight, it's not talked about much. Agnew is a skilled guy as well. Good fighter. Never maximized his potential, but Kovalev showed, in my opinion, that he was a serious fighter. Again, Agnew wasn't a serious test. I mean, really, we just we knew Kovalev was a bona fide, damn good fighter when, most people saw him beat Andre Ward in the first fight. But, watching the Agnew fight, yeah, sure, people are going to reflect on this years later and be like, yeah, well, not much to it. But with anything, and this is, again, I find myself repeating myself quite a bit, but with anything, it's always best to watch the fights themselves. That way you can apply proper context. And again, Agnew, he's no superstar, but go and watch that fight. I mean, Kovalev's jab was outstanding. I loved how often he jabbed to the body. In fact, he ended up breaking Cedric Agnew's rib with a jab. And this is why I contend that Sergey Kovalev is the hardest puncher at 175. I mean, not only did he kill a guy, but he was able to break Agnew's rib with a jab. I mean, can you find me another fighter who's doing something like that? Golovkin is obviously a very hard puncher. David Lemieux is obviously a very hard puncher. Deontay Wilder, obviously, that's plain as day. And Inoue, he's obviously a very good puncher. But to me, when you combine killing somebody with the ability to break a rib with a jab, and then you start to, again, you apply context to other fights. I mean, you watch his fight with Salah, and he put him out was basically a power jab. I mean, put him out. He was able to, hurt Andre Ward. I mean, obviously Ward had been hurt before. Actually, Andre Ward was hurt early in his career by a Minnesotan named Kenny Cost, and I can't seem to find that fight. I remember seeing it. I don't know if it was a local channel, Altitude. I'm out in Colorado, by the way. I'm out in Denver, but I think it was Altitude, and I remember they showed that fight, and I think that was at 160 pounds, and Cost was able to hurt Andre Ward, I think in the first or second round with a left hook. His record was something like 10-0, and he had 10 knockouts or something flashy. But I think he was just a local guy, so it didn't really matter much. There wasn't any depth to it. And then, of course, Andre Ward was dropped by the wonderful right uppercut by Darnell Boone. And then he was obviously dropped by Sergey Kovalev. And Kovalev is. This is my thing: is how many guys do you watch who can almost pity pat like Sergey Kovalev did against Alvarez in the second fight? Again, I don't want to call them pity pat punches, but he was just kind of touching him. You know what I mean? It was more like a winky right kind of thing where he was throwing to touch him. He wasn't throwing to hurt him. And you could see that his punches were still doing damage. I mean, because he wasn't exposing himself for long periods of time, it obviously made it tough for Alvarez to counter. But again, as Ward, who already fought him, noted, his punches are so heavy that that's all he needs to do to get your respect. He just needs to touch you. And again, I know I've heard sparring stories and whatnot, and people say, Golovkin hits harder and whatnot. Again, maybe that's true. I mean, it's awfully difficult to quantify these things. There's no real hard data. There's nobody putting microchips in boxing gloves and, breaking it down. And a lot of times this is about timing. I mean, plenty of legends and top-level athletes and, guys from, top to the bottom, journeymen, gatekeepers, etc. I mean, a lot of times they will tell you that the hardest that they were ever hit was not by, necessarily the guy that you would think it is. I mean, sometimes when you're in sparring, you just get clipped right. A lot of it's about timing. So, so I don't want to read too much into sparring stories. But again, I just on my end, I think Kovalev is still the hardest hitter at 175. And I know a lot of people would say that Artur beat Urbiev, and again, that might be the case. But then again, it might be Joe Smith Jr. Yeah, Joe Smith lost to Dmitry Bivol, but he's a big dude, and he really packs a punch. And of course, maybe it's not Bivol either. Maybe it's Callum Johnson. I mean, it's really a division that's packed with punchers. But just want to, I like to go with the proof being in the pudding, and to me, that's Kovalev. And again, the Agnew fight was one of those that adds context to his career. Yeah, right. Again, it wasn't a great win. I already noted that, but again, he was just jabbing to the body with just ferociously, and Agnew eventually just couldn't take it and got broken down and didn't hear the final bell. But I would like to, ask you guys if you want to send me a message or just comment on Twitter or Facebook or whatnot. I'm wondering if Kovalev had been given the decision in the first Ward fight, how would perception change around his career? Because I've noticed that, perception is everything a lot of times. I've noted this with a number of guys in the past, where if they get a win here or a win there, their career has just changed completely, And so if Kovalev gets that decision over Andre Ward in the first fight, where do we place him? If we're talking about the top light heavyweights of the last 25, 50 years, where do you think he rates? And even though he didn't get the decision, should he still earn a placement like that? Where do you rank him amongst the the great European light heavyweights of the last 25, 50 years? Guys like Calzaghe and Michalczewski and Henry Mask, et cetera, et cetera. Anyways, chime in, comment. You can find me on Facebook. You know the deal. And you can also listen to this podcast on, Stitcher, Spreaker, TuneIn, Spotify, wherever you can find podcasts. The websites, that works too. Just comment, rate, subscribe, all that stuff. And once again, I appreciate it.